What a beautiful day for a ride. You believe that life happens? Man, I sure do. 30 years ago, I had hair down to here, and I was basically a buyer at a retail record store. Now, I'm a long-term care resource, and I've helped thousands of people with long-term care need over the last 30 years. Life happens to you whether you plan for it or not, but the better prepared you are determines the consequences you and your family are going to face with those life happens events. So the challenge is, where do you go to find in-depth information without feeling like you're being sold? Well, I've created a safe place to come and experience my 30 years of knowledge to give you the things you need to understand about long-term care planning. Whether it's what it is, how does it work, the options available, even the pricing that everybody seems to want to know right off the bat. But you're never going to be sold. Nobody's going to call you and sell you anything. So the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to come away with solid information. The best thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a resource for education, analysis, choices, probably even a second opinion if you want it. So in the next few minutes, you're going to learn the 4 basic foundations of what's important about long-term care planning. So here we go. So how do you like my beautiful office? I mentioned that in the next few minutes I'm going to discuss the 4 foundation things you need to know about long-term care. So the first thing we're going to deal with is data. And if you've done any research whatsoever on the internet or wherever you go, there's plenty of data out there in regards to long-term care. But let's simplify it. The older you get, the higher percentage of needing care. That's just, one of those things that really nobody disputes. So it comes down to how long do you think you're going to live? And there's been different studies done out there. When it comes to the retirement question, it's always interesting that people respond that their biggest fear or concern when it comes to retirement is outliving their money. So obviously they have a perception of a long life. But if you change the question to, would you ever consider long-term care protection? All of a sudden it's, I'm not going to live that long. So what's it going to be? Long life? Not. Is that what you're going to gamble with? That's what we have to look at the foundation of what we're trying to achieve here when we're thinking about a possible long-term care event. It's not going to happen to me, it's not going to happen to you. But what if? I'm constantly asked, how much does long-term care coverage cost? And really, there's costs that we need to talk about before we get to a price. Because the issue of price becomes important when there's an absence of value. And then let's talk about the true costs. Because when we're talking about long-term care, there's 3 costs that take the greatest toll on not only you, but your family. The first one is the emotional cost. And if you don't believe that, ask anybody that's done any caregiving hands-on for any length of time, and they'll tell you about the emotional cost. Then the physical cost. The physical cost is a known fact that people that are caregivers basically generally pass away shortly thereafter when the person they're giving care to passes away, or sometimes even before. So the stress and the emotional overwhelming position that they go through in those situations is overwhelming. And now let's talk about the financial cost. The financial cost is something that people underestimate because obviously we never see ourselves in that situation. Well, the financial cost for pure long-term care expense today can be $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a month depending on how much care you need. So do the math. We're talking about income streams that you currently have designated for other things. Maybe it's charity, maybe it's lifestyle, maybe it's travel. Now you have to come up with, out of that income stream, to spend $8,000, $9,000 on caregiving. Where's it going to come from? So that's really the cost that we need to concentrate on before we determine what's the price of coverage. So now that we have an understanding of the data and the cost, what options are available to us? What planning options do we really have to look forward to put things in perspective? Well, there's only 4. The first one is, I mentioned it earlier, your income. You can pay for it right out of your pocket, and if you have the income to do so, great. Just remember it's going to be possibly that $80,000, $90,000 a year or more. The second option is your government. Usually when I say that, people kind of go, yeah, sure, that's going to happen. But that's a possibility. And there's three entities within the government that are perceived to be possible long-term care options. The first one is not, that's Medicare. Medicare truly does not give you any type of long-term funding. Second one, the VA. They offer a limited possibility, but then again, you have to have some experience in the military, and it has to be during wartime to get access to that. And there's certain limitations there as well. So a lot of times when people look into that, they find that that's not quite the answer they want to hang their hat on. The last one pays for a lot of long-term care. That's Medi-Cal, or Medicaid if you're in a different state. But we all know that basically that requires you to be in a certain economic position to take advantage of that. And even that is not where most of us would want to have our care at, which is at home, because Medi-Cal doesn't provide care at home, really, from any extensive standpoint. The third option is your family. You can have your family take care of you. You know, a lot of people end up that way by default because they didn't plan. But when you think about the things I talked about, the emotional cost, the physical cost, and then the financial on top of that, obviously family's a choice, but is it the choice that you want to take? Because once you've made that choice, they have no choice. And the last option is long-term care coverage. And there's a lot of different varieties out there, and obviously I'm here to educate you on those when you feel like that might be the option to go forward with. But that's the only four that are available. There are no other options, just the four. So there you have it. That's the foundation you need to know as far as long-term care. So if you think long-term care coverage might be a choice that you want to look into further, then I offer a further deep information webinar that allows you to be the savvy buyer. You're actually going to know more than probably most of the people that are going to offer this subject matter, because you're going to get 30 years of experience from me of what you need to know about this. All you have to do is register for this free webinar, and we go on and we continue to teach the subject matter, and you can learn those wonderful things to be that savvy buyer.